Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is, very easy to pronounce, Luca Bolognese. And today we are going to talk about the ObjectSpaces framework. So I know it's a Wednesday and, you guys have seen already 600 or 700 slides. So my primary goal for this session is to keep you awake. So I was thinking, how can I keep you guys awake? And the main thing is a console demo, right? That's very exciting. So I have all my talk is one big demo. I just have, if it works. If not, I don't know. Anyway, I just have a couple of slides and then we go directly to the demo. And there is one problem with the demo, which is I wanted to write the whole demo in front of you, right? So code the whole thing. But if I do that, a couple of bad things happen. Number one, I can just show you 2 or 3 demos. Why I want to show you, 5, 6, or, plenty of them. And number two, I'm writing code, and I'm talking to you, and I write, and I talk, and you may have noticed I have this slight accent, right? So I'm writing code, and I'm talking, and I start talking very fast, and you guys have no idea what I'm talking about, right? So what I'm going to do instead is I already have a lot of code in Visual Studio ready, and I'm going just to modify part of the code just to point out some stuff. But I'm not writing the whole things. So I hope this is going to work out well. All right. So we are that red part, not readable in the other, not readable bigger part. It becomes serious after a while. Don't worry. So, okay, what are object spaces? The problem we are trying to solve is very important. At the same time, it's not new. You have data, and your data is in your relational database, and you have business logic. And your business logic is expressed in terms of your objects. It's often an object-oriented kind of business logic. In some way, you have to grab your data from your relational database and bring this data into your object. So you have been doing this by using SQL, which is the most powerful way to do it. There is nothing as flexible and as performant as submitting directly a SQL query to your database. The problem is that you have to write all those queries, and you have to maintain them. And as the size of your application grows, this becomes a considerable piece of code that you have to maintain. So what we are doing with the object spaces, we are introducing a mapping layer that essentially separates your business logic from your data access logic in such a way that you don't have all this code to write and to maintain. So this is in what we are about. And if you guys have been at the Mike Pizzo talk, there has been a whole talk about when to use which technology. And my 3-phrase kind of speech about this is, if you need flexibility and you need the maximum performance, then our relational API are, for you, are the best thing that we have as flexibility and performance are concerned. If you have a lot of business logic, so you really have this object model, then our object spaces framework is there for you. And if your application is mainly about data transformation or doing some reporting on a web page, then our XML APIs are the best. So if you can go back in time to yesterday and see Mike Pizzo talk, that would be, would explain even better. So this is the simple possible architectural kind of design of what our framework is. There are just 2 pieces I want you to concentrate on. One is the object space, and the other are the mapping files. So you come to the object space and say, okay, give me a bunch of customers. The object space says, okay, customer. It goes to the mapping file, sees that those customers map to those particular tables, and submit the correct SQL query. Retrieve data from the database and materialize objects from this data. Once you have your objects in memory, you can modify your objects and then go to the object space again and say, okay, persist those modifications. The object space looks in the mapping file and submit the right set of insert, update, or delete statements. Essentially, you're working at your object level without knowledge of the underlying database, and the ObjectSpaces framework takes care of all the communication to your underlying store. And just, I haven't told you before, I'm asking you to save questions for the end, because we need to talk in the microphones. All right. First demo. So how you write your object model to be able to work with the ObjectSpaces framework. Can we switch to the demo machine? All right. So first of all, where we are. This is the structure of my application. I'm going to show you the object model, how to initialize your environment, queries, and all this stuff that is here. First of all, we are here, part of the system, system.data.objectspaces. So if you go, everything I'm showing you today, you can run it in your in your own machine. It's all in the bits that you have. There is nothing in a special build. You can run the exact same things that I'm showing you. Okay, so we are there. Let's talk about the object model. My application is a very simple geographical kind of application. I have continent. Each continent has many countries. Each country has many cities. So very simple hierarchy there. The continent itself has a name, like Africa, Asia, or things like that, an area, and an array list of countries. It also has a private constructor. So we do need a private constructor to be able to create those classes. It can be private, it can be public, but we need one empty constructor there. As you can see, there is nothing in this code that is object space specific. You don't need to inherit from any base class. You don't need to implement any interface. It's just a normal C# code. If you guys are object-oriented people, you are looking at this public field and you're thinking, oh man, is it serious? I mean, public fields. And yeah, we don't require public fields. All the fields here are public so that I can show you how to make them private later on. So don't worry, you can use private field and everything. It was a trick. Okay, so I have country here. Country has a name and a population, and it has an array list of cities. It also has a back pointer to continent. As you may see, again, one-to-many relationships are just array lists, as you would have them in your normal C# code. I have city. City has a name and a number of cats, which is... you guys are laughing, but it's very hard to figure out this information for each city in the world, you know? And it has a country, right? So this object model is very simple. We obviously support mapping, inheritance, many-to-many relationships, one-to-many relationships, and not everything, but a lot of complex things. But for the sake of this application, let's just talk about this simple object model here. All right. My application is, again, I'm parsing the first parameter to my application. I'm initializing, this is just a connection string, initializing the connection, creating a new object space. I'm going to describe you exactly what the object space is in a second. And then, depending on the value of the parameter, I'm going to execute the demo number 1, which is initialization, demo number 2, demo number 3, and so on and so forth. Very simple for the sake of this demo, right? Okay, so my machine in this moment is completely clean. If I go here and I show you my database, there is no Word database there. There is a Word backup in case everything is screwed up and I need to start again. But there is no Word database. So. And if you look, this is the directory where the executable is. And if you notice, there is no XML mapping file there. There is nothing. It's just a completely blank machine in this moment. So the initialization code print is just the console.writeLine, so nothing big there. I'm creating 4 continents here with their area. I'm creating countries, and I'm assigning those countries to these continents. Those are countries in Asia, Europe, and Americas. Then I'm creating all the cities, and I'm assigning those cities to each country. So each city, by the way, all this population, this number of cats here is real. Now, the population is real, the number of cats also. Okay, then I have other cities here for each, each single country, and so on and so forth. At this point in time, I have all my object model in memory. I have all my continents, all my countries, and all my cities, all in memory, all created. Now, this object persistence, I have to be clear on this. It is not part of the object space. I'm using the object persistent class just to initialize my database and create my mapping file. The ObjectSpaces framework works on the assumption that you already have your object model, you already have your XML mapping files, and you already have your database. This is just an utility that you can find in the web data CD that you are giving out at the booth, at the web data booth, in the SQL Server area. There is this utility which is called object persistent. And I'm using this utility just to create, to kind of initialize my environment to then showing you the rest of those demos. So I create an object persistent object. The second parameter is the name of the database I want to create. Then I'm persisting Africa. I'm persisting all the countries for Africa. And I'm persisting all the cities for each country. I'm doing the same for Asia, doing the same for Europe, and the same for America. Notice that this particular tool is kind of nice, because there is nothing that is, there is no SQL statement, there is nothing there. The tool is going to generate everything, by magic. All right. Let's try it out. This is the most dangerous part of the whole presentation. All right, it worked. By the way, I hope you guys appreciate my effort for the graphical part of the, All right, so now if I look here and I do a refresh, there is a Word database. It has tables, and all the data for my little application is there in those tables. So you can see Word here. And if I look in my directory, there are all the mapping files that the ObjectSpaces need. Again, I want to be clear on this. The ObjectSpaces is not the ObjectSpaces that generated those files and the database. It's just this utility, okay? Because I've heard in the Ask the Expert a lot of confusion on this particular point. This is why I'm telling it hundreds of times. All right. This is the mapping file for the database. This describes the structure of my database. So this is what this one is. It's not interesting to look at the particular syntax for those files. I'm just loading them in Visual Studio because I'm going to modify them later on. This describes the shape of your object model. So which parts of your object model are persistent. Okay? For example, the name for the continent is persistent, the area is persistent, and so on and so forth. And this one, the third one, describes the mapping between the objects and the tables. All this mapping is auto-generated, so it's a very simple mapping. One object, one table, one field, one column. The ObjectSpaces framework supports much more complex mapping, like, I don't know, 2 objects to 1 table, 1 object to multiple tables, inheritance mapped in 3 different ways to the database, so many to many. We support all these things. This is just the simple because it's generated automatically. So, all right. So now I'm ready. Let's get back to the slides. Hey, you were sleeping, man. I gotcha. Okay, so we want to be as transparent as possible. We don't want you to, you know, as I said, to inherit from any of our classes or to implement interfaces or things like that. And so, yeah, that's what it is. All right. Now we have all our environments set up. We have our database, we have our mapping file, we have our object model. Now we can really start using the framework. Let's get back to the demo. When you see the yellow slide, it's kind of an indication. You told me I can joke on you. So. All right. So my code for my first demo is very simple. I'm creating a new object space. Whenever you guys go to our namespace, which is system.data.objectspaces, the object space is the component I want you to focus on. This is the main kind of point of entrance to our framework. Okay? The first parameter there is the mapping file that describes the mapping between your objects and your tables. The second point the second parameter is the connection to get to your database. So this is how you initialize an object space. This line here is the query line. So I'm saying get object set, so I'm retrieving a bunch of objects. The result of this query is an object set, which is a set of objects. Is the equivalent of the data set in ADO.NET. The first parameter to this method is the type of object that I want to retrieve. So I'm querying for cities. Okay? The second parameter is the query string. In this case, nothing. The third parameter, I will describe it later on. So, very first thing, let's try to execute this query and retrieve all the cities that are in my database. So, here are all of them. All right, so now let's try to submit some more interesting query. The first one is, I want all the cities where number of cats is less than 1,000. All right, let's try to execute it. So, an important thing to notice is that in the query, I'm expressing we call this language OPath, by the way. So, and I'm expressing my query in terms of my object model. Okay? Those are not the name of the columns in my database. These are the fields in my objects. Okay? Wherever, if the database structure changes, okay, or if it changes, this particular code is still going to work because the queries are expressed in terms of the objects. So this is a very simple query, right? Not not very difficult. So let's try to submit a more complex one. Population is less than 10 million. So this time I'm querying for all the cities where the number of cats is less than 1,000, and they are in a country where the population is less than 10 million. So I try to execute it, and this is the result I get. You may notice that in terms of the business logic, the query is fairly simple. Okay, it's understandable, I think. If we go to here, the queries start to become a bit more complex. There is a select, there is a from clause, a where clause, and then there is an exist. So my point is not to show the syntax of this exact query. My point is that a lot of queries are simple in terms of the business logic, and they are complex if you had to write the equivalent query in relational terms. Okay, so let's do something even more complex, so we maximize the probability that it doesn't work. All right, so let's do this. Country.conti. No, that was correct. Continent.area. Area is more than 50,000. Okay, in this query, I'm asking for all the cities when the number of cats is less than this number, and they are in a country, and I'm just using the countries with population less than 10 million, and those countries are in a continent where the area is more than this particular one. So let's try to compile this guy. Let's run it, and those are, trust me that that's the right result at least. Again, if I show you the SQL query for this particular thing, this is even more complex. Again, select, from, where clause, that's the first exist, then select, then another from, where, and another exist. So the query is becoming a bit, not obvious to write. But I want you to notice that the same expression of the query in business logic term is still understandable. All right, so I promise you that I will show you how to make your fields private. So let's see how we can do that. Let's go here to my, let's do something else. All right, okay. Let's go here, let's make this particular field private. So, okay, let's make private string, let's call it underscore name. Okay, so now my private field is underscore name. To make this work, I need to go to the OST that describes my object model and says that now the private field is called, now the persistent field is called underscore name. It's not called just name anymore. I have to go to the mapping file, and for city, say again that the persistent field is underscore name, not name anymore. Okay, so now this code will work. We'll retrieve all the data and, work fine. There is still a problem, though. The problem is, how do I query for a field that is private? I mean, I'm the user of this class. I don't know that this class has a private field, right? So there is kind of, I want the field to be private, but at the same time I want to be able to query over this field. In an ideal world, I would like to expose a public getter and setter, and I want the framework, when the query is expressed in terms of this public property, to translate the query in terms of the private field. So let's do that, and let's add a public accessor here. Public string name, get return underscore name. I need to write the setter as well, if not it's not going to compile, which is expected. name equal value, tac, tac, tac. Thank you, guys. All right. So now I can compile this one. Now I have my private field and I have my public field. Now I need to tell to the framework that whenever it sees a query for the public one, it is really a query for the private one. So I go here in my OSD and I say alias equal name. By doing this, I'm telling the framework that the name property is an alias for the underscore name field. So now I can come here and query for that particular name. So I can say name equal Albisola, which is a very famous city in Italy. If you guys don't know it, I think it has 10 inhabitants. And I query, here I have my result there, okay? So now the framework knows about this association. So you can model all your data as private fields, and if you want to query over them, sometimes you don't even want to query over them, but if you do, then you can have a public accessor, and our framework is going to, work in this way. All right, let's get back to the slides here. The important things about the query language, about OPATH, what we try to achieve at least, is to make it as simple as possible, at the same time powerful enough in such a way that you can write real applications. It's not just, kind of a toy language. And another thing that we try to do is you are writing your code, and we wanted you to write your code, and when you have to query, it's like continuing writing your code. We don't want you to have this paradigm shift. Okay, now I'm writing my code, now I'm querying. Okay, we try to achieve that. And at the end, I will leave you all the resources to give us feedback and tell us if we succeeded or we failed in this goal. But this is what we try to do. And the most important thing is that this language is defined in terms of your object model. That's kind of the base of everything. All right. Query. No, that's the wrong machine. All right. Now, we have created all the data. We have our database. We have been querying over the database. Now let's talk about how you materialize your objects. Can we get to the other machine? Thank you, sir. Okay, let's query for continent there. Continent. Let's remove this query that was good for city, but not for continent. Okay, you may notice that I can query over whatever object in my object model. If I execute my query now, I get back just the continents, okay? And this is what I wanted, right? I wanted just the continents. But what if I want, if I know that my code is going to access the countries for those continents? Okay, how can I specify that I want both the continents and the countries for those continents? You can use something that we call a span. What a span is a way to say, I want continents, at the same time retrieve me all the countries for those continents. Or maybe all the countries and all the cities. Okay? So, for example, I can say continent and I can say countries here. The span is the third parameter to get object set. Now, if I submit my query, I get both the continents and the countries. Okay? The span may be more complex than that. I can say countries dot cities. And if I submit my query, I will get, continents, countries, and cities. the way that I think about the span is I think about my object model, which is a graph of nodes, and I think about the span as a way to specify a subset of this graph that I want to retrieve, because I know that my code is going to need it. Okay? So this is nice, and let me show you some other piece of the code. Here, how do I print, right? So here I'm printing those guys, and the print function, depending on what is the type, I'm passing in execute continents, print countries, or print cities. So very simple kind of stuff. So the continents is going to do a for each over all the continents, and doing a for each over all the countries for these continents, and a nested for each, another for each on all the cities for those countries. I'm showing you this particular detail because if I submit a span, there will be just one SQL query that gets generated at this point in time. At this point in time, a query is submitted, retrieve the data for continent, countries, and cities. And after that, when I'm navigating through my code here, there is no additional SQL query because I already have the data there. Okay? So this is nice. Okay? Nice stuff. But there are cases. You guys still awake? Let me look at you. All right, we are good. All right. There are cases where you don't know if you are going to need this particular set of data. Maybe your code depends on some runtime information. Maybe it depends on the user to giving you some information. So essentially, when you're writing the code, you don't know if you're executing one part of the code or a different part. In this case, the span is not going to help you, because with the span, you are retrieving a whole bunch of data, and maybe you just need some pieces, right? Not all the data, and you don't know while you are writing your code. So, span, no good. Very simple, span, no good. All right. So what you really need to do is, ideally, let's think about what the ideal situation. You would like, whenever your code is accessing a particular property, you would like at that point in time a query to be submitted and the data to be retrieved. So you will be submitting the query just if your code really is accessing that property. The way we call that feature is not that we invented this particular name. We call it delay loading. And if you want delay load, your one-to-many relationship has to be expressed as object list. The reason for this requirement is that we need a hookup point. We need a point where our code can run and can go and grab this data from the database. If you write your field as a normal array list, our code is not running there, right? So there is no way for us to go down and grab data. There is another piece of, something else that you have to do. You have to go to the OSD and say, here, let me find the right place, lazy load equal true. Lazy? Yeah, lazy load is correct. Now we are calling that delay load because lazy looks lazy. So, our marketing don't like that too much. But anyway. All right, so the result of my application is very similar to as it was before, right? But now the way that those queries are generated is completely different. Now, instead of generating just one single query at this point in time, right here, At this point in time, we just retrieve the continents. Okay? We are not retrieving the countries right there. But while the code is accessing the country's property, right there will be a query generated. So the query is generated just if you need it. Okay? Just if your code is going to need this particular data. All right, thank you. Wrong. All right, so there are these three ways to kind of get data. One is to submit a number of queries. I'm querying for this guy, this guy. The other one is by using the span. I'm retrieving this particular object, and I do know that my code is going to need some other objects. So I retrieve them as well. The third way is I don't know which part of the data my application is going to need. So I mark my properties as delay load in such a way that if I need additional data, I'm going to the database and I'm retrieving it. All right. This one. All right, so we have the database, querying, materialization, updates now. All right, we wanted the updates to be as simple as possible. Updates in an object relational framework as we are should be as easy as give me some data, modify some data, update it. That's all you need to do. And if we switch back to my demo machine, let's close this one down. All right, I'm creating my usual object space here. Then I'm retrieving the city of Albissola. I'm saying get object from the city, I'm getting back the city of Albissola. I'm modifying one property. I'm setting the number of cats to a random number so that I can run this application multiple times. Then I'm waiting for the user to press a button. And then I'm calling persistent changes on this object. So, as I said, as easy as query, modifications, persist changes. By talking at the Ask the Expert and with some of you in the eye here, so we do navigate the object model. Meaning, if you have an object model and you are modifying objects in different parts of this object model, maybe you are assigning an order from one customer to another customer, or you are modifying something that is 3 levels deep in your object model, then you come to us and you say, update changes. We would navigate your object model and find all the modifications to your objects. And we'll submit all the right set of insert, delete, and updates. Okay? This is a very simple modification just for the sake of this example. So let's run it. I think it's 3. Okay, so I retrieved Albissola, which is this particular city. I'm about to modify the value to this huge number of cats. And I say persistent change, and I did it. You're thinking, yeah, whatever. So let's prove it. All right, let's query for cities. I didn't like this one. Oh, this is interesting. Country in C.countries. No idea how that one gets deleted. All right. So let's see if Albissola has that big number of cats, and here it is. All right, so, okay. Wow. I think if I have a grid, what can happen? Anyway. All right, so this is it's nice if you are the only user to your database, right? So you have full control. What if there are multiple clients all of them accessing your database. To simulate this scenario, let's do this. You can say, oh, no. It took me months to come up with this trick. All right, so here I'm simulating two different clients. The first one is retrieving data. The second one is retrieving data, exactly the same data. At this point in time, both clients have this data in memory, okay? So they are waiting to commit. We use optimistic concurrency, all right? So the first client that is going to submit his changes is going to win. The second one, he will try to go to the database and he will find that the data that is in the database is different from the one that he originally retrieved. So it will fail. If I run this and I submit this one first and this one second, the first one succeeds and the second one fails. And this is the number that is going to be in the database. And if I query, what is it? Oh, okay. That's the number I get. Okay, so this is optimistic concurrency. This is a very scalable way to write applications, right? Nobody's waiting for anything. Or everything happens. If something goes wrong, you get an exception. Sometimes you do need all the transactional properties, right? You need really to keep locks in your database. Again, we wanted the process of working in a transactional environment, to be as simple as possible. We just want you to say begin transaction, do some stuff, commit or roll back. Again, as simple as possible. And if you look at the code here, not here, but here, so you just say begin transaction, and you pass the isolation level. This is optional if you want to. So I say begin transaction here, then I'm querying, then I'm saying commit or roll back. So again, simplest possible thing. Calling begin transaction, doing some operation, commit or roll back. If I execute my code now, the behavior will be different. So we are in the same situation as before here. Both of them have retrieved their data. But now, if I try to submit my changes here, this guy is not going to submit his changes. He needs to wait for the result of the first transaction. He needs to wait if the first transaction is going to commit his changes or not. So if I go here and I submit it, now you see the first one that got the lock won and the other lost. Okay? So this is not, transaction 101 kind of course, but I just want to show you how it's easy to kind of set your transactional behavior, right? It's easy as to say begin transaction and commit. And by the way, something that a lot of people ask me is what do we do for enterprise services, right? So we do enlist our transaction in the distributed transaction. So if you are using, the equivalent of COM+ transaction, all this code will be automatically enlisted. So it will just work. All right, let's get back to my machine. Got it? All right, so yeah, modifications are as simple as doing some modification to your object model in memory and calling persist changes. And we do support a bunch of optimistic concurrency settings, like timestamps or a subset of the columns, all the columns. We support a good number of them. Not all of them, but a lot of interesting ones, at least. Okay, I hope I kind of convince you, if you are still awake, that the code to work with the object spaces is fairly simple. The complexity is in the creation of those mapping files, right? So what we are doing is we are coming up in Whitby with a designer that will show you on the left side your object model, on the right side your database, and you can pick and choose how to map each object to each table. If you start from your object model, we will generate all the database structure. If you start from your database, we will generate all the object model. And we will keep all the business logic that you add. We won't override it. So this will be a very cool tool. I'm very excited about this project. And this will ship with the next version of Visual Studio. Right now, so this is not ready for a demo yet. But we wanted you guys to be able to go home and try our framework. So what we did in the Web Data CD, that again you can get at the booth, there is a sample application. There is a tool that one of our guys in our team, David Skepa, that I think is standing up like a soldier over there, the guy with his hands raised. So he wrote this tool, and you know, I've been showing you how it works, and it's very usable. You can write a mapping file without writing the XML by hand. So let's move back to the other machine. All right. So I am aware that the font here is a bit small, maybe. We didn't have time to make it larger, so I'm sorry about that. So you trust me that what I'm saying is what is there. So there is, on the left side, again, there are the classes. On the right side, all the tables. And if you have inheritance hierarchies, you can map them like this. You can map each single member, for example, the name, to the name column in your table. And you can map all the relationships in your object model, like between continent and countries. You can specify all the foreign key and primary key. You can load an existing object model from an assembly. And you can create a mapping file from an existing database. So you can do a lot of nice things. It is not obviously as nice as the one that will ship in Whitby. But I think it will be enough for you guys to try out this technology. As you are writing, we are writing under the cover the XML. And you can notice that it is an internal tool because we have this nice feature. Floating button there. It's a new Longhorn control. And marketing will love this one. All right, thanks, sir. Okay. We are almost there, guys. All right, so we have all this mapping feature. We have this mapping layer, and you know, we can do a lot of things. As I told you, it is support very complex mappings, but we'll never be able to support all the mappings that you need. You'll always come up with a mapping that is so, you know, it's correct, but it is so strange that we don't support it, right? I was saying it's so bizarre, but then you get offended. So let's say you have some domain requirements that needs this particular mapping. And so if we don't support it, what happens? You may think that you are stuck, right? So we created a way for you to submit whatever query you want. It can be a stored procedure, it can be a complex query, whatever you want in terms of your relational database using SQL, and generate objects out of this query. So let's go back to the other machine. So if I'm looking at this code here, the first part is normal ADO.NET code. This is a normal connection string. There is a select. My, creativity is very limited, so that's the most bizarre I came up with. And I'm creating a command. I'm opening the connection. I'm getting back, I'm getting back a data reader. Okay, so this is normal ADO.NET code. You can have your own store procedure. You can have your own aggregates function or whatever you want. After you have done that, you create what we call a DB object reader. The DB object reader just takes as the first parameter a data reader, the type of object that you want to generate from this data reader, and the mapping file between your object and your data, the data from the wire, right? And then I'm printing out those things. So let's see it working. Maybe, all right. Yes, so I'm retrieving the first 3 countries there. Okay, so the point here is that I'm using ADO.NET and I'm wrapping the result of my ADO.NET query in terms of objects. Let's get back to the slide machine here. Okay, so I just have this time, so I cannot show you everything is in our framework. It's becoming bigger and bigger, and I invite you to go there. There is, I think, I believe, a very good documentation there, and please try it out and try all the features that are there. These are just some of them. There are all the complex mapping. We have an abstraction that we call Object Engine, which is even at a lower level than the object space. So it gives you more flexibility. It is harder to use, but it is more flexible. And we have plenty of other features for you to try. So what we are working on right now, what we are still working on this framework, the very first things are generics. So you may have noticed that I had a bunch of cast in my code. With generics, the compiler can strongly type check your code. So you get a compile error instead of a runtime error. Plus, the code is much easier. The first part is C# code. The second part is VB code. And you may notice that before, I was returning an object set. The object set is a collection of objects in memory. Now I'm returning an object reader. There is the same duality that there is in ADO.NET between data set and data reader. The object reader is a stream and is built on top of the data reader, so that when you call read on the object reader, you are really calling read on the underlying data reader. So we are essentially building objects over the wire, over the stream coming from SQL Server. So that's what this piece of code is doing. Other things, we are still enhancing OPath. We are still introducing new functionality there. At the same time, we are very aware that it needs to be simple. So we are trying to find a balance there, right, between being really flexible and being simple. So we are still working on that. Other things, we are working on a report query language, which is a way to say, I really need just the first name and the last name for this object. Maybe I'm just creating a drop-down list box. Okay? I don't need all the 25 fields of my object for this drop-down list box. So the report query language allows you to say, retrieve just these 2 fields. Okay? Don't retrieve the whole object. We are working on, again, on DML, which is a way to say, I want to, for example, to delete all the customers in the state of Washington. Do I really need to retrieve all of them, mark all of them as deleted, and submit all the changes back? That's very inefficient. They are 2 round trip to the database, while in SQL I can just do 1 command, right? So we are working on a similar functionality in terms of object. We still want to keep the separation, the binary separation between your business logic and your data access logic. That's kind of at the core of our framework. And we are simplifying the mapping format. the ones that you have, it's not the simplest possible one. But you are generating it with a tool, so that's probably not a big deal for you. But we are working on simplifying it even more. All right, so you can run everything I've been showing you. All right, your bits has all this stuff. And we are still there. We are, 2 years ago, we have been showing you this technology preview that was our early thoughts on ObjectSpaces, about an object relational framework, and we have been evolving it. The team has been growing, and the project has been growing, and now we are almost there. We are, in the next version of Visual Studio. All right, how you can give feedback here? We have a news group, and I am aware that the news group is not in a good shape. Some of you guys are laughing because and I apologize for that. Nothing I can say. Right now we have people that will be in charge of monitoring this news group. So if you start writing email on that news group, you will have answer from people in our team. So we have people that are doing that. So don't worry about that. If you can go back in time, there is this Ask the Expert yesterday that I suggest you guys go. And we also have this email, and a selected number of people in my team are on this email, and we'll get all your feedback. So go ahead, try this framework, and tell us what you think. And that's it. I'm taking questions. Thank you. Please go to. There are 2 mics, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned that part of this is.
Where are you? Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. In the vein of keeping things separate, OPath looks very exciting, and you sort of showed some examples of how the OPath translated into raw SQL statements. Will it be possible at all to use your OPath to SQL transform, to essentially use your object relational mapping technology, or at least OPath to SQL separately without using other parts of the system? It seemed like that would be very easily separable from a technical perspective.
Yeah, this is we are looking right now in these possibilities. There is nothing I can tell you for sure about this particular question. I'm sorry about that, but we are looking on exposing some kind of plugin for your code moving forward. Okay. It will probably not be there for version 1. Okay, I don't think we will be there for version 1, but it's something we are working on.
Okay, I heard a rumor that this only works on SQL Server.
Oh, this framework works on Yukon, SQL Server 2000, and SQL Server 7.
Oracle?
What's that?
What about Oracle? But this is basically a plug for if we could get the OPath to SQL, then we could do it on top of ODBC or whatever.
As I said, we are really working. We are really looking right now in some way to let other people extend the framework to support a different provider. As I said, I do not believe we'll be there for version 1, but we are definitely looking at that.
Over here. A couple questions. The trade show area is kind of torn down now, so where do we get the the data CD?
At the SQL launch tomorrow.
Okay. Next one is the span and delay lazy loading thing, are they orthogonal, or can you use them at the same time?
You can use them at the same time. In case you have a property defined as delay load and you submit a span, the span would override delay load. Okay, great. And the last one is, does this work well today with all the neat new data binding stuff in ASP.NET, two-way, all that stuff, the pagination? Yeah. Right now, you can bind the object set to a data grid in WinForm and it will work. We are working with the ASP.NET team, and if you have been at the ASP.NET data binding talk, you probably have seen a sample of ObjectSpaces in ASP.NET. We are working to make a declarative attribute in ASP.NET that you call ObjectSpace data source, and you will be able to bind the result of an OPATH query to a grid or to something in ASP.NET.
All right, and it looks really great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one question, one sort of statement or opinion. One question is you didn't touch upon object context, and then with object context, the resync method and the issues that, why that's there essentially, and whether you're considering addressing that in the would-be time frame and sort of what I would consider fixing the issue, or leaving it in the would-be time frame release.
So the question is about object context.
Right.
The object context is something that we had in a technology preview that we shipped 2 years ago, I think. And right now in the object space, which is the facade to our framework, you don't see the object context because we want to keep it hidden. We think that without the object context you can satisfy, you know, a vast number of scenarios. In the object engine, the object context is still there. It is called Object Manager now. And I would be curious of what are those problems, those issues that you are kind of telling me. And please send me an email to this particular email alias, and I'll be happy to hear them.
Okay, and then one opinion, you said that you were looking at constructing some sort of reporting language or syntax to apply to OPATH that would just give you back the fields or the properties you're interested in the object. Why wouldn't that be an overlay on top of the interface you currently have and default to all the fields? And that way you could take all the fields by default, and then if you wanted you could specify a subset of those on your request, as opposed to trying to come up with a new way of just getting the service back.
There are multiple solutions to this problem. One of the solutions is what you are describing, which is in the literature called a smart proxy. So you define just some fields, you retrieve an object which is an empty shell, but just have some field, right? And we look at that solution, but it doesn't really solve all the scenarios. Because, for example, you cannot have a report that spans 2 or 3 objects, right? You can have a report just for a single object by doing that.
Well, but you could actually specify the namespace or some sort of qualifier on the overlay. So you could actually construct an arbitrary tree, essentially, that overlaid your request.
Yeah, but then what you get back is something that is hard to bind, for example, to a grid or to something, because it's a set of hierarchies of objects that are half-filled. And then, if you are executing business logic in one of those objects, your business logic is probably going to fail, because the fields of those objects are empty. So we look at all the trade-offs, and we thought that exposing a way to get data instead of objects from your object model was more flexible and less error prone. But if you disagree with that, I'm happy to hear your feedback and can discuss about this.
How would you compare the capabilities of OPATH with XPath with respect to SQL XML?
Yeah, so we started with XPath. That was in our very first prototype. And, I just tell a joke here. So we started with XPath, and we had a bunch of early adopters, right? And we showed XPath to them. And this guy told us, XPath is I don't really want to teach all my programmers XPath. It's an XML thing, right? And so we went back to our offices, and we changed the backslash with a dot. And we went back to these guys, and they said, "Oh, you guys are genius."
In terms of capabilities.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just joking. Sorry, I'm answering your question. Sorry. And so then working on the problem for other 2 or 3 years, we discovered that you cannot just use XPath, because XPath is defined in terms of a hierarchy, which is your XML document, while the object model that you are working on is essentially a graph. So I'm not sure exactly in terms of function by function what we support and what XPath support. The problem domain is slightly different, because in one case you're querying over an XML document, in the other case you're querying over an object model, which has some different characteristics like inheritance, like other stuff that XML doesn't have. So.
Okay, thank you. How would you compare your performance of ObjectSpaces to something like SQL XML?
Yes.
Despite the deserialization that you're sort of implicitly doing.
So I can tell you that our performance goal is to be about 30 or 40% slower than the SQL client for the equivalent scenarios. Right now, I do believe we are about twice as slow, but we still have a lot of road ahead of us to make it better. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, if I was using typed data sets in my application today, could I use ObjectSpaces to handle my persistence layer and then throw away my data adapters?
Yeah, this is something we are working with the Visual Basic team to achieve. Having your piece of feedback is important for us so that we can prioritize this in a good way. Right now, I believe you cannot, but we are working with them to make that happen. That will really help you in moving forward.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We should take this offline because I'm curious to hear your exact scenario for that.
One other question is, if you had foreign keys in your database, are you going to insert your parents first, top down, and children deletes up?
Yeah, we are going to follow the right order to insert our data.
Great. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, you mentioned that you supported inheritance and different mappings for inheritance. When you're submitting a query, is that accounted for? So if, for example, I subclassed country with coast and had an attribute which was the length of coast and maybe a reference to ports, a ports collection or something in my subclass, will I be able to get back a collection of both types of country and country with ports and all the data associated with them? And if I can do that, will I be able to cast in my query?
Yes, the answer to both of them is yes. When you submit a polymorphic query, which is a query on your base class, we would return all the objects of the base class and all the class inheriting from it. And you can upcast your return values to the right value over there. So
In the query, so that I can...
in your query, right now you can access just the properties that are defined in the base class. For example, if you have a query for person, you're saying, give me back all the persons that live in the state of Washington, you can do this just if the state field is on the person object. If the state field is on the inheriting person object, this doesn't work.
Okay.
Right now.
And is this supported in all scenarios? If, for example, you had a complex mapping scenario, you'll support the sort of subclassed queries in all scenarios? So
your question is if we will support queries to access fields that are defined in a subclass?
Yeah, where, for example, if you had a one-to-one mapping of class to table so that your query was going to have to do a union on two different tables, one for country and one for country with coast.
Oh, we do support, maybe we can take this offline, but we do support query. We do support query that result in union among tables. What we don't support is query that refer to property that are not defined in the objects you're query for. That we don't support right now. And maybe we can talk and see if we can.
Okay,
or
thanks.
If it's an interesting
Hi.
thing.
Are you using reflection for filling the objects?
We are actually using something that is called lightweight reflection, which is a new feature in Whitby that makes a reflection very fast.
So something like generating class on the fly or something like that?
It's something along those lines, but it doesn't have the drawback of generating classes on the fly, which is that you have a long startup time.
Okay, thanks.
It's a new feature in Whitby, and we are pushing for that feature to be there because it's very important for our performance number.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I saw for your optimistic concurrency checks that you can statically define the list of fields that are checked. Is there a way to optimize or tune your updates so that you are only checking against the fields that have been modified?
Yes, we have that feature. You can specify one of the value is modified, and then we'll check just the fields that are modified.
Great, great. And one other is I saw that you can lazy.
That's a dangerous one, though. We do
I'm
support
aware of
it,
that,
but
yes.
it is a dangerous one.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
For the lazy loading of lists, do you also support a similar notion for one-to-one relationships?
Yeah, we do. We call it object holder.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
Hi. How do you support, let's say if you have a continent and you have a list of countries, and let's say you bind it to a grid and we modify the continents and then we added a bunch of countries and then we deleted another bunch of countries and we want to save it in one shot. Can we do that?
Can we do that? I'm aware that we do have a bug right now in the binding code. I don't know if the scenario that you are describing is going to hit this bug. In theory, you can do it. I don't know if this is alpha code, so we have some bugs right there. And I do not know if you are going to hit this particular one. In theory, you can.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Do you plan to support multiple data sources?
Yeah, we are not planning. What we are doing. We are considering how to provide a mechanism for external party to plug in their own implementation, and we are investigating that possibility. It will not be there for version 1.
So do you mean that then it's possible to override behavior like insert, delete, and update?
Yeah.
And do you also plan to embed security and access control on the instance level of the objects?
We don't have any plan to solve those problems in version 1.
Okay. Do you support calculated attributes?
Calculate attributes.
For example, person.age.
I think you can do that with the custom table, right? Calculate attributes. Yeah, we do have a feature in the mapping where you can specify the SQL query that gets generated to load a particular object. And right there you can have a calculate attributes and load one field.
And it's the same thing for constraints. Do you plan to support constraints on the model level?
I'm not sure I understand what exactly.
Constraints so that you cannot modify upfront things that do not fall, just like the database. Before you go to the database.
We see this as a business logic thing, meaning this is something that you have to write in your business logic to check that the state of the object is correct, because before you go and update it. There is, if you mean that we don't have any declarative way to specify those constraints. Okay. We see those as a business logic requirement. I do understand that it is theoretically possible to express some of them in a declarative way, but we are not doing that.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, the bus is leaving at 6:45, they told me.
Probably want to stop in about 10 minutes, but we'll be available tomorrow in the SQL Lounge, so I'm going to talk to all the ObjectSpaces people that will be there. So, I don't know, I don't have a schedule for us right now, but if you come stop by, we can figure that out. We can stay for the 15 or 20 minutes. We can stay as long as we want, but I want to make sure we have the option.
Yes.
Take the bus back and then go to the party for the bus.
Okay.
When you create your mapping file and you associate it with an object, and suppose you only do a partial load of data for a drop-down, is there a way to identify which columns in your object or properties in your object were loaded from that SQL call?
Yeah, I don't think I explained that part very well. It's what you're doing there is you're saying that you want a set of fields for some object, right? What we return back is not an object at that point in time. It's just data. It's just a data reader that has just 2 columns, right? We don't, if you say you just want the name, the first name and the last name for an object, we don't return you a customer object. We return you just a data reader that has last name and first name. So we return back data. We don't return back an object.
Isn't that data reader used, though, to fill in the object?
We just, if you submit a report query, if you submit an object query, we return objects. If you submit a report query, we return data.
Okay. Okay, and it can be a subset of that mapping file. So whatever mapping
Yeah,
file
it can
you
be
use.
a subset of the mapping file, but it is not an object.
Okay.
Or maybe I misunderstood your question, sorry. Yeah, it can be a subset of the mapping file.
Okay.
Okay. They told me that I can get one more question. I think we are sticking around, right, for a while. So we stay around for other questions. Just all these people with the blue shirts can answer questions. So just one more here.
Does your transaction roll back the changes to the objects in memory?
You got me on that one. We do. Where is Dinesh? I think that right now we do not. In the next milestone we do.
In the next milestone you will?
The next milestone means we are not doing it in the bits that you guys have.
Okay. And real
So
quick,
in beta 1 we'll be doing it. Right now we are not.
and real quick, what's your interop story with the lightweight transaction manager and the Indigo transaction services?
Oh, my answer to that is that we haven't worked on that at all.
Okay.
So I have no idea. Sorry. All right. Thank you guys again. Please stop by and ask me.
Two questions. When you said that